Now, you mentioned before that one of the really interesting things about the Circle record was that it not only bridged generational differences but also political differences. Do you think a record like that could be
I
made?
think I would use cultural.
Cultural.
Because it's a
Yeah.
but that's just socio-political.
Yeah.
Kind of works too. Yeah.
Do you think in the haphazard chaos of the digital age you could make a record like that today?
Yeah, I think you could. We've done 3 of them, by the way. The second one was really pretty cool too, with Roseanne Cash and John Hyatt, and of course Johnny Cash, among others. The Carter sisters as well. Bruce Hornsby, Levon Helm, Emmylou.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really fun project. And the third one was the most recent one was we had Willie on it, and again John and June, and Tom Petty made a little cameo on one of Willie's tunes, which was really great. Yeah, I think I think because there's just so much more. I use the word noise just because there's so much more of everything in the digital age that it's a little tough to get people's attention. That kind of record, yeah, sure. I mean, I think people are doing something like that as we speak. Mm-hmm. At the time, it seemed pretty revolutionary, and to get back to what you talked about in the during the Vietnam War era, and Nixon's in the White House, and the hippies versus rednecks was a real thing.
Yeah.
So there was that cultural gap, but there was also a generation gap that bridged, because when we did that album, there were a lot of folks that, basically, there were families that, the kids and the parents weren't talking, because they didn't agree about anything. And, and in some ways that brought folks together, which I think is really phenomenal.
Which is like the point of art and music, especially.
Exactly. Well, it's the old cliche of it's a universal language, and it jumps over barriers, and I love that, and I totally believe in that as well. Tough right now, we're in a similar situation.
Yeah, nothing's the same, everything's the same, right?
Nothing's the same, everything's the same. In fact, if you 20 years ago, I was like, yeah, man, we'll never be that polarized again. Like, well, guess what? Hello.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate,
Well, I always believe in, like, the pendulum swings back and forth as it goes, but that I believe in.
Well, yeah.
I'm optimistic about humanity.
Oh, me too. I'm totally optimistic about humanity. I think that for all the wonderful things that the internet has brought us, I think it's also, brought out the absolute worst in people, which is unfortunate and quick. You can be real quick with that bad stuff,
Well, it's funny.
But, blah, 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 who cares?
Yeah. Well, in terms of that recording session for Circle, was there a moment or a performer that vividly sticks out for you, that just standing there and being like, good Lord,
Maybelle Carter.
Yeah.
All of. To be honest, every one of them. Roy Acuff. Merle Travis. Merle Travis was one guy that we actually knew prior to making that record, because we had opened. We had played gigs with Merle in L.A. when we were kids, when we were a jug band, and so opening for Merle Travis was huge.
Yeah.
So we knew him a little better, but the Scruggs family were just amazing. And Earl was really responsible for bringing Maybelle in, because they've been friends for musically and socially for years.
Yeah.
Doc Watson, these were all like, these are people that we just kind of blew our minds that we actually were on a first name basis with them.
Yeah.
And then getting to record with them was a total bonus. But there was something about Maybelle that was just, she had this presence that was really like angelic. She was like this. I don't know. It's hard for me to find an adjective,
Yeah.
But super cool. That was pretty stunning. She shut us all up. We were a bunch of wisecracking guys, not that far out of our teens, just like, hey, then she walks in. It's like, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Well, since
there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah. Well, since
and one of my early guitar heroes, I might add too, because as a kid, Wildwood Flower was like, that's guitar, what's the word I'm looking for,
Well,
it's a primer,
Oh, totally. I mean, you're talking about literally the foundation of most of the 20th century of music moving forward, in terms
the Carter family. Yeah, definitely had a lot to do with it. Yeah.
Well, now, since I'm based out of Western North Carolina and we're previewing a show in the Great Smoky Mountains, what is it about that high lonesome sound that still appeals to you? Why is it that it's something that you gravitated towards in terms of not only that record but also those people involved? What was it about that high lonesome sound?
Oh man, I just here's the irony for me is that when I started listening to bluegrass music, I was really more of a fan of the instrumental stuff.
Yeah.
It took me a minute to really get into the vocal stuff, and when I did, I was in hook, line, and sinker. Is that high lonesome sound? But it took me. I came at it kind of sideways. Again, I'm growing up in Los Angeles, not in Deep Gap, North Carolina. So, but luckily we had a club that we frequented called the Ash Grove, which was like the really cool roots music folk room in Hollywood. And I got to see people like Doc play there, and there was a band that actually were actually East Coast guys. What was the name of the band? The Greenbrier Boys, whom I loved, and I got to see those guys play there. And Mississippi John Hurt was one of my favorite another guitar hero of mine. So that kind of gave us some context, And when we finally got out on the road, as a band years later, we just eat up by it, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you finding yourself in full circle moments these days now that you're in the older generation? You might have younger musicians looking at you for that wisdom that you looked at 40 or 50 years ago from those people that were on those records?
Oh, absolutely. And we take that. We really try to honor the responsibility as much as we can. And it's a spot that we really didn't ever expect to be in. Part of it is just because we're older now. But I think that there are musicians that have looked up to us over the years, and we find that that's something we're really honored by. As far as like sage advice, I don't have a whole lot. Yeah. just listen to the good stuff and practice a lot, and try to find your own sound, find your voice. And if you're gonna do this, you got to be committed. It's a real deal,
It's like you got to say, it's like hell or high water. This is what I'm gonna do, and the rest is just details.
Exactly. Well, the other there's another side to that too, which is I have a lot of friends that don't play music for a living, but get great joy out of playing music. On porches and on in backyards and at picnics and family gatherings and just sitting around a living room with their guitars and their mandolins and banjos, fiddles. I mean, there's a real beauty to that as well, which is one of the things I love about bluegrass festivals and that ilk. It's a great thing. You don't have to be, this doesn't have to be your vocation to love it.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's another thing that I love about this music. I think that's something about acoustic music in particular, is that you get this, those guitar case and mandolin case are pretty easy to lug around. Yeah. You don't have to have a van,
Yeah.
And you can have a blast doing it. So, if it becomes such a passion that, you want to pursue that art as a way to make a living, again, not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
But it sure is fun. But it's great. I mean, I'm very grateful that I've gotten to do this most of my life.
Well,
from the age of 18.
My final question is, what is it like playing music, touring and traveling and recording and meeting all kinds of walks of life of people? What does that taught you about what it means to be a human being?
Oh man, well, again, we're back to humility again, because it's a great, number one is it's a great way to communicate with folks playing music, but I think it's also to remember that you have a responsibility to try to, if somebody approaches you and they want to talk to you about, tell you what your music might have meant to them, be patient, because everybody has a bad day, and sometimes but I always want to catch myself and think, you may never see this person again. Just remember what it was like when you met Earl Scruggs.
Yeah.
And remember how gracious he was. So in terms of being a human being, certainly that's part of it. Humility and patience and just again, honor the position you're in.